Hello, what's up, family? I hope you're doing well wherever you are today. So today we're going to talk about James Baldwin, and probably I know most of you are well acquainted with James Baldwin. So in one of his greatest speech, in one of his greatest talk that he talked about the black people. Now I'm gonna talk about his history a little bit just before showing you this greatest speech that he shared with the black people, and I feel like it's so resonating with me as a person who is in Africa. And sometimes I normally hope that our black folks from Africa should also see these speeches, see these messages of our brothers who are back in the United States, and at least learn something from him. I know that James Baldwin is an activist. He wrote a lot of books, poems, plays about the black race, talked about sexuality, talked about the black oppression. So these are things which happens to us daily. And in one of his speech, he said a lot of things that I resonate with. Now I want us to hear this speech, and then I'll say something about James Baldwin, which I believe that it's important for all folks around the world. So kindly stay tuned as you watch this video. I hope it helps you wherever you are. This is Eugene from Kenya. And just before that, if you watched this video and felt like you resonated with it, you can consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you. Then let's watch the video, then come back.
What is relevant about this is that whereas 40 years ago when I was born, the question of having to deal with what is unspoken by the subjugated, what is never said to the master, of having to deal with this reality was a very remote possibility. It was in no one's mind. When I was growing up, I was taught in American history books that Africa had no history, and neither did I. That I was a savage, about whom the less said the better, who had been saved by Europe and brought to America. And of course, I believed it. I didn't have much choice. Those are the only books there were. Everyone else seemed to agree. If you walk out of Harlem, ride out of Harlem downtown, the world agrees. What you see is much bigger, cleaner, whiter, richer, safer than where you are. They collect the garbage. People obviously can pay their life insurance. The children look happy, safe. You're not. And you go back home. And it would seem then, of course, that it's an act of God, that this is true, that you belong where white people have put you. It is only since the Second World War that there's been a counter image in the world. And that image not come about through any legislation on the part of any American government, but through the fact that Africa was suddenly on the stage of the world, and the Africans had to be dealt with in a way that had never been dealt with before. This gave an American Negro for the first time a sense of himself beyond a savage or a clown. It has created, and will create, a great many conundrums. One of the great things that the white world does not know, but I think I do know, is that black people are just like everybody else. One has used the myth of Negro and the myth of color to pretend and to assume that you are dealing essentially with something exotic, bizarre, and practically, according to human laws, unknown. Alas, it is not true. We are also mercenaries, dictators, murderers, liars. We are human too. What is crucial here is that unless we can manage to establish some kind of dialogue between those people whom I pretend has paid for the American dream and those other people who have not achieved it, we will be in terrible trouble. I want to say at the end, at the last, is that is what concerns me most. We are sitting in this room, and we are all, at least we like to think we are, relatively civilized, and we can talk to each other at least on certain levels. so that we could walk out of here assuming that the measure of our enlightenment, or at least our politeness, has some effect on the world. It may not. What is dangerous here is the turning away from anything any white American says. The reason for the political hesitation in spite of the Johnson landslide is the one has been betrayed by American politicians for so long. And I am a grown man, and perhaps I can be reasoned with. I certainly hope I can be. But I don't know, and neither does Martin Luther King. None of us know how to deal with those other people whom the white world has so long ignored, who don't believe anything the white world says, and don't entirely believe anything I or Martin say. And one can't blame them. You watch what has happened to them in less than 20 years. It seems to me that the city of New York, for example, this is my last point, which had Negroes in it for a very long time. If the city of New York were able, as it has indeed been able, in the last 15 years to reconstruct itself, tear down buildings and raise great new ones, downtown and for money, and has done nothing whatever except build housing projects in the ghetto for the Negroes. And of course the Negroes hate it. Presently the property does indeed deteriorate because the children cannot bear it. They want to get out of the ghetto. If the American pretensions were based on more solid, a more honest assessment of life and of themselves, it would not mean for Negroes, when someone says urban renewal, that Negroes simply going to be thrown out into the streets, which is what it does mean now. This is not an act of God. We're dealing with a society made and ruled by men. If the American Negro had not been present in America, I am convinced that the history of the American labor movement would be much more edifying than it is. It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them.
So yeah, this speech made me learn a lot from him as a black person in Africa. And as I said earlier, I always want my black family, my family in Africa, my African brothers and sisters to also see these messages, to also learn. And this will help us as black people to integrate with you easily, understanding the oppression, understanding your struggle. And I like one thing that I noted down while learning one or two things about the James Baldwin's history. Now listen, he talked about things that I believe that are important. So there are things that he talked about. He says in his view about the oppression of black people, he said that the white man is not only the master but also the slave of his own history. He is not only the oppressor but also the oppressed. He is not only the enemy, but also the victim of his own violence. He is not a liar, but also the truth teller. He is not only a dreamer, but also a nightmare. Now, I understand one thing. We as Africans know. We believed, and there's something that I think I'm trying to forget, which he also talked about. And he argued that white supremacy was not only a historical problem, but also a present reality. Yes, back in Africa, a lot of us are still struggling with what we call the white supremacy. And it has left us a mark that still makes us believe that black is not enough. We as Africans, or we as black people, we are not sufficient. I know we have disparities. I can't just wake up and say black. There is some disparities. We have black people in the United States. We have black people in Africa. So me, for example, as a Kenyan who has understand a little bit of culture of the black American culture a little bit, and also the African culture a little bit. So I have both of them. Now I just want to bridge the gap between Africans and African Americans, or the black Americans or the African Americans who have already identified themselves as black people. So we as Africans back at home, we normally face these problems of white supremacy. a black person will rather just go and buy, in a place where they believe that it's fancy, rather just buying from the African market. And this white supremacy is also seeing a lot of things. We have our own youths back in Africa who are trying to bleach their color, you know, just to do away with the black, and it's so painful, the narrative that we were sold, we as black people, to only value things which are white and leave alone things which are black. And a lot of things are so messed up, including the things that you believe in. I don't want to talk about a lot of things, we have the white Jesus, we have the black Jesus, so we have a lot of messed up things that the white supremacy has left for the black person. But all in all, I'm glad that Africa is still waking up, and we as Africans, we are trying to make our brothers and sisters learn much about, where our brothers were and where our brothers are coming to. And I'm always glad seeing Black American or African American understanding the civil rights movement, understanding that at some point they can also come back to Africa and, relate with us as Africans. And with that, I hope the speech of James Baldwin helps you in a given way. Until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute. This is Eugene from Kenya. Again, if you watch this video for the first time, you can consider subscribing to my channel. On my way to 3,000 subscribers. If you do me that, I'll just be happy. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.